Hi, welcome to my beginner guide for Amane Nishiki in BlazBlue Central Fiction. In this guide, I will talk about various pointers that are useful to you, in my opinion, if you are starting to learn this character. I won't talk about pressure, combo theory, or anything of the sort. Instead, I will be focusing on stuff that isn't necessarily talked about, but it is very useful to get familiar with. So in this episode, I won't cover drill, I won't cover various topics. Instead, I'll just try and tell you a couple of things you should explore for yourself in training mode. First, I want to talk about Amane's Jump A. This is the only overhead this character has. All the other options in the air that this character has are blockable crouching. This normal is blockable crouching. This normal is blockable crouching. This one as well. You get the point. Same goes for his special. But his jump A is the only overhead, and kind of the only way to reliably hit with it is to cancel from your jump B in a block string. Now this reduces your mix-up quite a lot. You can go for cross-ups, you can go for other options, but you don't really have a traditional high-low. However, you can still benefit from this. Players tend to react to Amane being in the air. So while you're going to play Amane, you're going to do a lot of this type of block string, right? And you're in the air doing that. Well, if your opponent has played fighting games for a little while, then in every other situation they want to stand up when a character is jumping at them. And they're not going to change that for Amane. They would have to retrain something that becomes subconscious. So, a couple of players will stand up when you do this. Okay, what's the benefit? Well, even if you don't have an overhead, you can exploit that. For instance, a very quick example is this thing. If I do a rising jump D, let's say from my jump cancelable normal here, if an opponent is crouching, chances are I get a little less hit. But, as I've said, people stand up. Therefore, what happens is you get all the hits of your normal. It's a little more consistent. Now this doesn't add up too much, but if you have drill level 2, it's a couple more hits, and on drill level 3, that's a lot of hits. Now this isn't something that's major, it's just an example to show the small differences that you could gain from knowing that your opponents will stand on your reaction. Here's another one. Since you have a jump cancelable normal, you can jump from a block string going into it, and you have this move in the air, down B, which brings you back to the ground very fast. Now there's no overhead here, but people can react to this. It's about slow enough and about fast enough that people will be standing by the time you do this move, or at least once it has started. What this means is players are no longer blocking low, and so if you let it whiff and do this, you can usually open people up. They just switch blocks right in the middle of that move and give you a simple conversion. So while Amane doesn't have a jump A, you can still abuse the fact that people are jumping and people are reacting. This is important because it kind of embodies how you want to play Amane in every situation. Now let's talk about movement. Amane is kind of slow. Kind of floaty backdash, slow run, no rush, no hurry. Floaty jump, very slow jump. Can go super high too. And he's got his command hops. His command hops kind of work like air dashes. So if you jump and dash forward, you can block for a little bit. Same thing with the hops. And there's also a little restriction before you can do anything out of them. It's small, but if I'm trying to jump immediately out of them, as you can see, there's like a little pause. But generally speaking, it's a pretty agile way to move around. The other thing about his hops is that you get one of them in the air and one of them if you want to leave the floor instead of jumping. You can cancel them into one another, and you get them back in the air as soon as you touch the ground. This is pretty relevant if you are getting comboed and the opponent drops the combo and you air tech. If you've already consumed your air dash, your air hop, my bad, then you will get a jump B instead of your hop. Okay, now that we've covered movement, let's take this idea that players are capable of reacting either subconsciously or on purpose to your things and apply it to movement. So because Amane is floaty, people can see where he's headed, right? If I jump forward and I do jump B, which is good, it's one of his better buttons, then people can kind of see that you're going to do it, right? Even if you do an air dash, it's kind of floaty as you're falling down. Even if you hop forward, okay, it's a little faster, but you can react to this pretty reliably. Instead, what you are interested in doing is not just going for the jump B, it's going to try to hide your intentions. So if you add little extra flares of movement, little extra uncertainty to where you're going, it makes it harder to react to a thing that's otherwise reactable. So for instance, if I want to get in right now and I do this, then you could have reacted to the small dash forward. But if I dash forward, hop back, hop forward, right, I'm hiding my intentions a little better. You can do this various ways, and Amane has quite the tool set to complement this. So if you're going up, you can go down with jump 2B. If you're going forward, you can go down with jump 2B. If you're going forward, you can stay up with a hop. If you go forward, you can go back with another hop. You want to get creative here, so I suggest as you start playing with this character to just feel the movement in training mode, get to know your options. Try to just feel it out. So the next thing I want to talk about regarding movement is managing your Herdbox. As we've seen, this button is pretty big, and it leads to a lot of options for this character. But this button is also really, really fat. So if we look at it this way, everything there is a hitbox. But just outside of that hitbox is your Herdbox. There's about no point on that normal where you can reliably hit them with just the hitbox part of it, which means it can very easily trade. So players that are not familiar with Amane, they'll tend to get hit by this a lot. But if you play against someone that is either familiar with it or knows that it can swing a button in this, then here's what's likely to happen. As you can see right here, there was a Herdbox there, and it's very easy to swing an anti-air in there if you're comfortable with the timing at which the Amane is going to jump at you with a button. So what do we do about this? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. So one of the things that we want to exploit is the fact that players are able to react when you're at the top of your jump in right here. You can either do this by canceling the fact that you're right here about to press a big button, like going down with jump 2B and letting their anti-air whiff. You can get out, but that doesn't really give you a whiff punish option. Also, another thing you can do is to just delay your button. Again, you don't want to become too fat pressing a button like jump B at all times, especially if an opponent is showing that they can appropriately respond to it. So as you've seen here, I was able to just delay my button slightly and it made it entirely whiff. So as you move, you want to be wary of not becoming too fat. Your buttons that will turn you fat are jump B, jump D, jump B. A couple of the jump C's will make you a little fatter around Amane, even though they reach for like a little further. But for instance, this would still get caught by an anti-air for sure. So what are the options that keep Amane pretty lean in the air? Well, his jump is pretty good. He doesn't really become extra fat when he does it. Pressing nothing is kind of the best usually. You can also use the hops as they don't have a fat hitbox or Herdbox, as well as they prop you up when you do it, which means you're no longer exposing your Herdbox to where you were just a few seconds ago after doing them. Jump 2B also accomplishes this, but downward instead. So instead of going up, you're going downwards. Also, Jump 2B is kind of a weird button where the Herdbox stops a little earlier in Amane's sprite, and the hitbox goes really, really deep. So if you manage to get it out in time, then it will shrink your Herdbox as well as affect your momentum, and usually that's enough to beat an anti-air pretty cleanly or someone that's chasing you. Let's look at a common situation when you're playing Amane. Sometimes the opponent is going to get a hit on you and lead you to the corner, and one of your very clean answer is to just jump, double jump, and get out with a hop. It's very strong, because if you're fuzzy jumping in pressure, you can see that you're out, and as soon as you lift off the ground, then you're higher than most average characters. So your fuzzy jumping is really good to get out there, and most characters cannot reach the top of the screen there. But as you'll play experienced players, they'll know that you're about to do this, right? And they can exploit it, either by staying on the ground, anti-airing you there and getting a reward. They can also jump and grab you and just prevent you from doing that. Sometimes they'll tend to go forward though, and just prevent you there. Of course, you can look for the throw, and you should always do so as Amane if you're not intending on pressing any button in the air. If I see you're capable of reacting to that jump, what I will do instead is make it look like I'm about to do that same movement pattern, but change it up. Which might look like this. So on the offense, the same answer would be to, oh, he's jumping, I need to get out. And now I just lost a little bit of my coverage, or at least my intended coverage. You could also mix it up by jumping up, staying back in the corner, and swinging down that way. If the opponent is backing up to respace themselves, then you've just given yourself breathing room to play neutral again. Like such. So, to sum it up, mix up your options by making it look like you're about to do something that you don't intend to do. Also, don't press too many buttons and let yourself be smaller so that your opponent's attacks and chase opportunities are going to whiff, or be much more likely to whiff. Next up, I want to talk about Amane's ground game. Now, you have a great anti-air, and I'll just skip over that. These two buttons are very great at hitting people out of the air. But I want to talk mostly about his C normal. One of the things Amane lacks is kind of good ground normals that can play footsies or play pokes. Yeah, you can, hit them with that, but if you're playing against a character like Ranga that has good normals or anything like that, yours are kind of slow with big Herdboxes to reliably beat someone with it as part of your main game plan. But you also have these really, really long C normals that go really, really far. They don't have any hitbox in between them and the tip. They only hit at the tip. They slightly extend Amane's Herdbox near him, but the scarf itself doesn't have a Herdbox. The problem with those normals is that if your opponent gets around them, they're slow enough that your opponent can get a whiff punish pretty reliably. These normals become particularly useful at this range when your opponent is doing something that's reactable, so you can keep them in check and get fat rewards. However, not all matchups are going to have situations where your opponent is always doing something that's reactable around this range. They're not really something for you to swing at either, because if you're playing in this matchup, for instance, then chances are you'll only get counter hit because your buttons are slightly slower than some projectiles that can reach you faster. In those situations, your goal shouldn't be to hit your opponent first with your C normals. Instead, it should be to let them whiff their button that beats yours and then punish them with a C normal, like this. But if you're playing in a matchup where there's not a lot that's preventing you from hitting your C buttons first, then it's very easy for you to try to harass your opponent with them, just in case they do something like this. Now, to note there, in situations like this, you want to know a couple of things. Your 5C will tend to whiff on crouchers, so some animations there have to be targeted with 2C instead of 5C. This is one of the examples. Another thing that you should be aware of when using your C normals is characters with fast movement speed. So New has a really strong backdash. Yes, you can punch her out of the Stein, but her backdash makes it really, really hard to chase. If Mew does this situation, then it's very hard for Amane's forward dash to catch up to her. It's possible, but it's slow enough, and her forward movement is fast enough that she can just run forward, and chances are that if you're looking for a C button opportunity, you won't find it. If instead the Mew player does something like this, and you were looking to be in your C button range, and you're going to chase and lose. You want to be wary of using your C buttons against characters that have very fast movement speed, just because you cannot react to it as well. So yes, I can punch her out of her dashing forward. But it's mostly a read, it's not a reaction. But if the character you're playing against has a really slow walking forward speed, then yes, you can react to them with your C normals, and it's not too bad to use them on reaction. But if you use them against fast characters, they'll tend to be reads, not reactions. Instead of trying to challenge faster characters with either your C normals or your slower ground buttons, it's better to just move with them. So if they want to do something like this, then you can move back with them. Now, when your opponent does something like this, sometimes you can even react to the situation, just wait and let them whiff a button because they thought that you were there at that moment. What you're looking for in these situations is just a dash forward. So if Mew is dashing forward, that's when I want to hop back, just so I can stay outside of the range of those buttons. Moving backwards like this forces players to kind of chase you and follow you a little further. Instead of poking with this, they'll be interested in poking with this. If you hop backward, yeah, they'll be in your range. Maybe they'll react. Now, of course, I pressed the wrong button there just to show the dummy going forward. But one thing that you can do is if you start noticing an opponent is chasing you like that, you can just jump over them and reset the neutral back on the other side. And now you've resetted the situation to neutral instead of trying to confront your opponent with buttons that would be riskier than just resetting. One thing I think this highlights about Amane is how you should think about your goal in neutral. Yes, your goal is just to get your offense started, but your buttons are not always going to win without any risks. If you throw your big buttons out as an opportunity to get started, then you're doing a lot of risk. Instead, what he has is these options to just go back to neutral, to just say, I don't want to deal with this situation, but I have the movement to wait and reset to a situation that I like. Forcing your opponents to move a little further, forcing your opponents to second guess their options, that'll give you the leverage to go in and take those risks. The last thing that I want to talk about is about Amane's multi-hit normals, namely his 5B, his drill normals, his C buttons for the most part, his A normals for the most part. All of them are multi-hits. The reason I want to talk about them is that because they create variance in matches. You're never going to quite get the hits that you want the way that you want. Let's see this with an example. Amane is going to do jump B, jump A. I got 3 hits of the jump B and 1 hit of the jump A. Now if I blocked, I got 2 hits of the jump A and 3 hits of the jump B. Let's see what happens when I'm crouching. The jump A whiffed and the jump B only gave me 1 hit. What this means for you is that in matches when you're using those buttons either for pressure, neutral, or combo theory, you'll have to be aware that they won't hit like you're expecting them to. And so one way to correct for this is to go in training mode and practice dozens of variations against the jumping dummy. So for instance, we know that Amane's combo theory wants to go into this knockdown. But sometimes you're not getting the hit that can lead into that knockdown, and you want to explore that. Now, if they're below you, it's going to work. Now, if they're above you, or a little further from you, it doesn't seem like it works quite as well. But if you're point blank, it always works. If you're at a certain distance, and jumping backwards, for instance, you can link jump B into jump C. If they're below you, sometimes you can get a jump 2C. If you're too far, or they're above you, then you won't get the thing. But it's going to demand you that you have adjustments ready just in time to get the knockdown off of any hits. Now you're not doing optimized damage, but you're guaranteeing knockdowns in situations that may have otherwise been scrambled. And this is really hard at first. Here's another example. Amane's combo tend to look like this. Simple, send them forward, reel them back, lift them up, and go to the knockdown. But if they're too high, sometimes you won't get the air sequence just quite right. As you see there, my jump B was a single hit. It's very hard to confirm that off a match in a single hit to recognize that it's going to be a single hit. But you can tell before going into the combo that you're hitting them from higher than you should be for that route. And then you need to think of an adjustment. So for instance, what would you do when you would get a hit that is a little too high to get the comfortable conversion you want there? Well, you need to think of an adjustment. So when you're starting to play this character, you'll have situations where you'll try to go for a combo that you know exists, but that the route doesn't allow you because you didn't get the hit right. Even if you don't know the vast range of situations that could go wrong while hit confirming your combos, just knowing that this is a thing will let you recognize, oh, the combo didn't work there. Did I drop it? Or was it a situation that was not allowing the combo to be possible? I've seen both in my play and in many other Amane's plays crossroads mid-combos and mid-sequences that you have to think on the fly, okay, what is the adjustment here? Here's an example. For instance, your opponent has burst, and you do this combo. And you want to make it burst safe with your super. Here's the thing that could happen. Yes, you're going into super to prevent your opponent from bursting, but what if you get a hit that's too high and the super isn't even available? It could whiff like that. You've just wasted 50 meter and they still have their burst. So, what can you do about this? Well, if you're practicing sequences with multi-hits, set it against the highest number of variables that you can find in training mode and practice against those. For instance, set a training dummy to jump and hit it at various height. Okay, that combo worked right there, but if I hit it from too high, it doesn't work. Okay. If I anti-air, oh, it might whiff as well on the anti-air. But I know it works. And you want to just practice that range and find practical answers on your own to what could happen in a match. Or, even if you don't do that, while you're playing matches, you want to be aware of those situations so that you recognize it and try to develop an answer later. So, let's sum up what we've learned today. Amane only has one overhead, which is his jump A, but people still stand. You want to use the fact that people react to such things to counterbalance your telegraph movement by hiding your true intentions with other movement. You don't always want to be too fat, depending on the player that you're playing against, and sometimes you just want to wait and let your Herdbox be small. You want to use your C buttons as a reaction to something and not as a ground poke against certain characters. You want to do that depending on their ground speed and how fast their projectiles or full screen options are against yours. And lastly, you want to increase your familiarity about your multi-hit normals so that they don't create too many scramble situations for you in matches. I hope you enjoyed the video. That was it for today. Thanks for watching.